Why is it that the past few years have been so freaking difficult and life-changing, transformational, and heartbreaking at times? Why is that? It's not because of any particular thing. It's not just because of the economy and inflation or C-19 and the pandemic. It's not just because of environmental problems or the spiritual ascension process that's occurring. There is a factor that is causing all that to occur. And those are the outer planet great conjunction cycles. And I discovered this when I was researching the outer planet great conjunction cycles for the 21st century. And I noticed that the 2020s have the highest density of these great conjunctions of all the decades. The 2020s, there is 7 of them, and they actually go from 2020 to 2026. They don't even take up that full 2030 range. Whereas the next highest decade is 2080 with 5 of these conjunctions. And the other interesting thing that you'll notice is that right before the 2020s, we had a dead zone. And this is the only decade in the 21st century where there were 0 great conjunctions between the outer planets. This is Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. And so we had this seesaw effect where we had a normal amount of conjunctions here, 2000 to June 8th of 2010. I lumped this one up with the others because it's close in time. Then we had nothing. Things got very quiet and we didn't have these energies in the background bubbling up to a greater degree. But then the floodgates were open and we had this massive sequence of great conjunctions in 2020. We had a follow-up in 2022. We just came off of a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction on April 21st of 2024. That's the most recent great conjunction that occurred. And then we wrap up this entire sequence with Saturn and Neptune meeting at 0 degrees of Aries, the very beginning of the zodiac, starting a completely brand new initiation cycle as it relates to the Saturn-Neptune synodic cycle. And that's connected to a lot of things. And so this is the final big push that we are going through. Of course, there are going to be new challenges and obstacles and opportunities in the centuries and decades coming up, but this is certainly a big convergence as it relates to our background planetary resonance morphic field. And so this provides a little bit of light and hope because we've gone through most of these and there are only just 2 left. There is the Saturn-Neptune conjunction on July 13th to 21st on 2025. This is at 2 degrees of Aries, almost a conjunction. It's a 13-minute orb. So they get very, very close, but they don't meet exactly. And then they finally do meet exactly, Saturn and Neptune on February 21st, 2026 at 0 degrees 46 minutes of Aries. So in this video, we're going to discuss these outer planet great conjunction cycles along with a couple other corroborating factors that are making this decade more difficult than a lot of us were hoping for. But in general, this is creating a very big transformational push. And these energies are being felt not only physically or emotionally or mentally or spiritually, but all of them combined together. And this is fueling this spiritual ascension process that many are going through. And for people that haven't started that, it's bringing more people online all the time through their own awakening journey. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm your host, Stefan Burns. Quick reminder that my Planetary Resonances e-course is available that goes into this in depth. It teaches you about these planetary resonances, these outer planet great conjunction cycles. We'll talk about that more at the end of the video, but that is a resource for you to explore 20 hours of content if you really want to understand how these planetary cycles influence the background morphic energy field, which is what everything manifests from. So that's available for you on my website, wildfreeorganic.com/planetary-resonances. Okay, so let's look at this. We have the early 2000s, and then we have this dead zone, and then we have our decade right now. Let's start with up top, we have some acronyms. JS would be Jupiter, Saturn. J is for Jupiter, P is for Pluto, N is for Neptune, U is for Uranus. So we had a Jupiter, Saturn great conjunction on May 28th of 2000, bringing in the new millennium. This is at 22 degrees, 43 arc minutes of Taurus. You'll also notice that we had a great conjunction between Jupiter and Uranus just 1 degree off from that this year. If we go here, Jupiter-Uranus, April 21st, 2024, 21 degrees, 49 minutes of Taurus. So almost exactly 1 degree different 24 years later. So some of the energies that we are dealing with in 2024 are also bringing back energies from the early 2000s. And so this is one of these modifiers that makes this decade even more kind of spicy, because not only is this a great conjunction in and of itself, it's also bringing up these energies from this cycle and presenting them to us again, but this time through a more Uranian lens. Then there was a long break, and then we had a Jupiter-Pluto cycle, a great conjunction, December 11th, 2007 at 28 degrees of Sagittarius. Then it was Jupiter-Neptune that followed May 28th, 2009, 26 degrees. There's actually 3 of them here. Then July 10th, 26 degrees, December 21st, 24 degrees, all in Aquarius. And that makes sense because Jupiter moves about 1 sign per year, about 30 degrees per year, has a 12-year cycle around the sun. And so it met up with Pluto and Sagittarius, and then 1 year later, it then hit Neptune, which was in Aquarius at the time. Then on 2010, June 8th, we had some conjunctions with Jupiter-Uranus. It was 3. The first one was at 0 degrees of Aries. Case in point, again, you'll see that we're working with these energies from this first decade again with the second decade. So 0 degrees of Aries right there, Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. That's coming back up again with this final conjunction that we have for the 2020s with this February 21st, 2026 Saturn-Neptune conjunction at 0 degrees of Aries. But it did retrograde back, both these planets, Jupiter and Uranus. So then we had one at 28 degrees of Pisces and 27 degrees of Pisces. Also, please note that if you have any personal planets or points at these degrees, you're going to feel them more strongly. And so this could have been an even more transformational time for you as a result if you have big planets there, for example, your inner planets, or even outer planets are well aspected or on certain angles, or these are happening on your angles, like your ascendant, your IC, your descendant, your MC. But then after all this occurred, we entered into the dead zone and there was nothing happening. And so, there were things happening. You have these, for example, these Jupiter-Saturn cycles. They have a conjunction, then squares, oppositions, closing square, then the next conjunction. But those are lesser aspects. We're talking about great conjunctions. These are the most powerful of the synodic cycle. They bring up the most. They are the biggest upwelling of energy into that morphic field of information and archetypal themes for us to deal with. And so we didn't have any during the 2010s. We also had a solar cycle maximum that was very weak during that time period. Solar cycle 24 was anomalously weak. And so you can see how these things manifest out. There was no great conjunctions during the 2010s. We also had the weakest solar cycle in over 100 years during that decade. This in general, as I see it, is kind of like a removal of a beneficial stressor or an evolutionary fuel, you could say. If you go to the gym or you do any sort of exercise routine or really any sort of skill task, you know that you need to do it to get better. And so for the gym, for example, if you are weight training, you want to increase your weight over time, and you're not going to get stronger if you actually don't do the exercise. And so we had this long break here, and I think what happened is that we kind of got soft. We didn't have these transformational energies pushing and pulling on us, and there was a little bit of complacency that developed. We didn't have extra solar forcing as a result of that weak solar cycle. And then all of a sudden 2020 rolled around, and not only did we have one great conjunction, there was actually a whole sequence that occurred in just a year's time. So then there's a Saturn-Pluto conjunction, January 12th, 2020, 22 degrees, 46 minutes of Capricorn, that also involved Mercury, the Sun, and Ceres supercharging that synodic cycle. And that is not the happiest synodic cycle. Saturn and Pluto is connected to things like pandemics and war and just disease and pestilence and things that aren't really all that cheery. But after that, we also had Jupiter-Pluto conjuncting. And so we had Saturn-Pluto go conjunct, and then Jupiter comes in, this agent of expansion, at slightly different degree points, right? This is 24 degrees, 22 degrees. That one got very close, but then it added more fuel to that fire overall. And then we had a new Jupiter-Saturn great conjunction, December 21st, winter solstice of 2020. And this is at 0 degrees of Aquarius, which is the next astrological age that we're entering into. That is the sign that Pluto is moving into and will stay in now at the end of 2024. It's been moving back and forth between Aquarius and Capricorn. And this was a great mutation into air. And so if you aren't aware of what that means, Jupiter and Saturn form these conjunctions in the sky, and they change element every 200 years or so, because they rotate around in such a way that they'll meet only in a single element until eventually they shift into a new element. And so when you have the first conjunction in an element that's going to stay in that element for 100, 150, 200 years, that's called a great mutation. And that makes that conjunction even more significant and powerful. And so there was in 1980 a conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn in Libra. And then it was in Taurus. We had the Earth element before. This was the final Earth element conjunction for Jupiter-Saturn. And now we are exclusively in air element conjunctions with Jupiter and Saturn until 2159. I believe that conjunction occurs in Scorpio. And so this is now almost 140 years where we have just air energy with these Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions, which are some of the strongest and most fundamental planetary resonances, because they work with the biggest planets. The biggest planets are Jupiter and Saturn by far. And they have like the most weight to them, you could say. And they're really connected to law and order and society and how we interact with each other and much more, though in different ways. And so 2020 was a real doozy because we had this Saturn-Pluto Mercury-Sun-Ceres conjunction. We had 3 Jupiter-Pluto conjunctions, and then we had a Jupiter-Saturn great mutation at 0 degrees, which Pluto is moving into at the same time. And this is right before we enter into the age of Aquarius around 2100 if we keep precessioning at the rate that we are. Then we had further instability with a Jupiter-Neptune conjunction at 24 degrees of Pisces, April 12th, 2022. Jupiter-Uranus conjuncted April 21st, 2024, 21 degrees of Taurus. Again, bringing up those energies from that 2000 conjunction, the last of the air great conjunctions between Jupiter and Saturn. And then we had the sequence here that we are about to find out what that means with Saturn and Neptune at this 2 degree mark with Aries, with that 13-minute orb that they'll get really close together. And then this final real conjunction that they have at 0 degrees of Aries, then Saturn will charge ahead because Saturn is the fastest mover. So a lot of very powerful energies bubbling up right now into the background planetary resonance morphic field because of these great conjunctions and kind of the math of it all, right? It's just how they are rotating around, they're orbiting. And then they just didn't meet up in the 2010s. If we exclude, these 3 and put them up here, they didn't meet from 2011 all the way to 2020. And then all of a sudden now we had this big sequence that's also bringing up and dredging up some of these energies from before. What astrologers have been tracking for millennia are these planetary conjunctions. Now we have Uranus and Neptune and Pluto and the other trans-Newtonian dwarf objects in the fold. But the theory is that these conjunctions, these movements of the planets and their geometric relationships to each other and the archetypal energies that they are embodied with, they shape our morphic reality field, and they bring up different themes for us to grow through and to evolve through and just to experience. And so we had that deficit in the 2010s due to there being no outer planet great conjunctions. But that certainly wasn't the only thing that was different in that decade as compared to before and after. We see solar cycle 24 here anomalously weak compared to the solar cycle before. Here's solar cycle 23. If I had the other data, you see that 22 and 21 are about the same strength as 23 here. And so we had a fairly regular solar cycle expectation. And then solar cycle 24 comes in. Maybe it was anomalously weak because there was that dead zone and that was what was manifested, or they're working together. This is still very much being explored and understood. But now we are ramping up to new highs. This red line here is the average. It's the smooth monthly average. But look at the actual monthly print in the gray. You see that our values now are going up similar to where we were in solar cycle 23. Much higher than solar cycle 24, which never got above 150 sunspots. And now we are at, in July, 196.5. And for August, we are going to be over 200, more like probably 220, 230, which is well up in this range here. And so this solar cycle is also causing a big shift as compared to the 2010s in terms of the energy that we're receiving from the sun. And this is interacting with us in a variety of ways, because the energy of the sun is what makes Earth hospitable and allows for life, and Earth transmutes that energy. But in general, more energy coming in means that we have more energy flowing through our bodies, activating different things, our DNA, how our cells are talking to each other, and group cellular behaviors and expressions, and also, so many different metabolic processes. It's really beyond our current understanding in terms of a clear scientific framework. There's so much more research that needs to be done on this, but people are feeling it. And that's how we know that there is something to this. And so we see that this solar cycle is also much stronger than it was last decade. And it's looking very similar to what we had in the early 2000s, but we have more great conjunctions happening in this decade than we do during any other decade in the 21st century. I also want to point out a key detail in the increasing electrification of our planet due to the rollout of new cellular network technologies, because there is a significant difference between 5G and the preceding cellular technologies, 4G, 3G, 2G, 1G, etc. And so we'll get into that, the physics of it. But first, let's just see the state of 5G. Here we have a graphic for the world, and we see how much 5G was adopted across different parts of the world. We see 2021, we see 2025. And so dark blue is at the beginning of the 2020s, and now we have these light blue zones there. They're forward modeling a little bit, but that's effectively where we are now in terms of 5G usage. And we see that there has been a huge change in 5G adoption in North America, 13% all the way to 60+%. Europe, same story, 4 to 44. Also in Greater China, massive increase in 5G. We see that some places are still really not using it all that much, like Africa. Latin America is kind of lagging behind. Some of the Eastern European states are relatively slow in their rollout. Asia Pacific, this is a little misleading. If you go there, you know that there is 5G everywhere in Asia Pacific, but maybe they're counting it based on the surface area of the land, and some of those islands are pretty uninhabited. But regardless, there's been a massive rollout of 5G technology, and this is significant because of the electric susceptibility of water. And so water makes up 70% of our body by weight, and 99 out of 100 molecules in our body are water. And the reason why is because they're so tiny compared to like a protein or amino acid chain or anything else. They're very, very tiny. And so they sit in and hydrate everything. They completely encapsulate our DNA, and they hydrate around collagen and all these things. And water is the great mediator between everything in our body. And it connects to different frequencies of light, the entire light spectrum. But what we see is that it really easily connects to frequencies that are greater than 1 gigahertz. And so we're looking at the electric susceptibility of water here. And on the x-axis, we have 0.1 gigahertz, 1 gigahertz, 10 gigahertz, 100 gigahertz. This is billion times per second, because a megahertz is million times per second. Gigahertz is 1 billion cycles per second. So that's 1 billion cycles per second. And then up here we have our dielectric constant. And we see that there's various kind of slopes for the temperature of water. The latent heat of water will affect the electric susceptibility. But in general, what you see is that as you go from low frequency here, 0.1 gigahertz or 100 megahertz, water is not absorbing these energies that easily. The dielectric constant is high. And then as you move past 1 gigahertz, this zone right there, as you go past 1 gigahertz, all of a sudden, water absorbs almost all the energy it receives. These are microwaves. This is how a microwave oven works. They use frequencies that are in this gigahertz range to heat up food because they know, and the physics is that water molecules will pick them up, they'll pick up that energy and information and then start to vibrate more. And this causes more cellular stress in our body. It's not just heat production, because water can contain that information. And it's just chaotic, random information, and it creates more non-coherence in the body. It shifts the body away from coherence and towards greater chaos, which is stressful and promotes inflammation and chronic disease. And so with the rollout of 5G, we'll see this right here very clearly. Here is 4G. We see that it has some of the band at 1 gigahertz, but most of it stops at 2.5. 5G goes from 2.5 gigahertz all the way beyond 50 gigahertz. And here is the human body temperature at 37 degrees Celsius. So I lined that up and look at the dielectric constant for water there. We are near the bottom of this electric susceptibility curve as it relates to the most advanced 5G technologies. A lot of them are still in this 10 gigahertz range, but there's plenty, especially from like Verizon and others, that are 20, 30, 40 gigahertz. And so those energies get absorbed dramatically, not only into our bodies, but into the entire biosphere, into the atmosphere. That's why they attenuate out so quickly and why they need them every few blocks, those antennas, because they get absorbed into water and other biologic tissues very, very easily. And that's a problem because it's just in general pumping more energy into everything that our body then has to deal with. And so this is another manifestation of these outer planet great conjunction cycles taking place in the 2020s. This is one of the things that it manifested up. Now it started back earlier because we had 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, but finally now it's hitting this electric susceptibility curve. And if they keep going higher with the frequency, let's say with like 6G, then it could start to become very deadly. This is already probably deadly in terms of a long-term time perspective and in terms of chronic disease and inflammation. But as that frequency goes up, it is going to get really, really bad really quickly because we already see what we're doing with 50 gigahertz here at human body temperature. We're absorbing nearly all that energy if we look at just standard water susceptibility. So these are some of the factors at play for why the 2020s have been so difficult. With these outer planet great conjunction cycles, we have now a stronger solar cycle with solar cycle 25, more solar energy coming in, and we have things like the deployment of 5G, which is in general just radiating our bodies to a greater degree. And so this is a big stressor and a big push, but something that it appears the universe wanted us to go through a necessary transformation process. And this is what I believe is responsible for this great awakening and ascension process that so many people are taking part in right now. I'll be talking much more about these great conjunction cycles on this channel. So if you'd like to see those videos, please subscribe. But if you want to get into it right away, then I have my Planetary Resonances e-course. There will be a box that pops up right there, which goes in depth on these different energies from a natural philosopher's perspective, looking at the science, the astrology, the mythology, so we can better understand where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. I highly recommend you check that out. 20 hours of content, 15 hours of me on video, discussing this, sharing what I've learned, doing a bunch of deep dives into a lot of topics, not only the inner planets and the energies of the moon, but also the outer planets, the dwarf planets outside the solar system, Planet X, the astrological ages, precession of the equinoxes, and so much more. And I'll be adding more content to that course with time. So if you sign up now, you'll get access to that before the price does eventually go up as I continue to add content to it. So again, Planetary Resonances e-course is available to you. That is your heads up and head start on all this. And you'll find it deeply valuable because what I found when I was making the course is that it helped put everything into perspective. And by having that higher vantage point as to what was occurring energetically, not only was I able to better see things and rationalize them and accept them, but I can now better plan for what's occurring. I kind of have the roadmap in my mind and know what I need to do when. And it just allowed me to find peace with it. By having some understanding, it was easier to not be kind of pulled by the current and sloshed around. It's like I know what that current is, I know which direction to swim, and therefore I do that. And so that's my own personal experience as I was creating that course. It helped really ground my energies and provide a lot of comfort to what was occurring in my life and still is, just in general. And so I think that is also something that's provided with this course, just through the educational aspect. You empower yourself in that way. So I hope you find that resource valuable. You can check out the course here. You'll need to sign up before the payment pops up. And then once you sign up and pay, you get access to the course. It's on demand. Learn at your leisure. And I'm wishing you all well. Have a great day. I'll see you all in the next video.